We're on the verge of a new console release, and there's a lot to be excited for. It's got DLSS, backwards compatibility, whatever this is.
Honestly, I couldn't care less about the Switch 2 at this point. In my mind, a system is only as good as its games. As a great man once said,
"Sounds great, but you've got to have a Donkey Kong game."
Rumors of a Donkey Kong game are nothing new, but along the decade-plus wait for a new title, real information is leaked that can point us in the direction of what Nintendo has planned for the leader of the bunch. Let's read the banana-flavored tea leaves and uncover what's next for the Donkey Kong franchise.
our story starts here.
The year is 2015. Retro finished one of the best 2D platformers of all time and moved on to their own original project. On the more casual side of the industry, the Toys to Life space was heating up with Disney, Activision, and LEGO competing for dominance. Nintendo entered the fray themselves a year earlier, leveraging the popularity of Super Smash Bros. To take their slice of the pie.
I'll get you, Mario. No way! How am I gonna win? Ha! Ha! Oh, hello everyone. Looks like you caught me playing with my toys.
During the E3 Nintendo Direct, Reggie sat down with Karthik Bala to unveil a collaboration for the latest Skylanders game. They looked through Nintendo's deep catalog of characters and selected Bowser and Donkey Kong to join the Skylanders universe with their own special vehicles in tow. The team at VV really impressed with their attention to detail in the character movesets, fine-tuning them in Nintendo's Kyoto headquarters. This gave the Bala brothers the chance to forge relationships, and sometime after Skylanders Superchargers shipped, they pitched a new idea to Nintendo. Enter codenamed Donkey Kong Freedom, a project featuring a more open, 3D style of play not seen since the days of the 64. They had Donkey Kong grinding and swinging on vines to climb heights. Nintendo seemed to be warm to the pitch, but Activision, being Activision, had them abandon the project and focus on what Vicarious Visions was known for: Destiny and Call of Duty. What? If you want to know more about this, check out DK Vine and Did You Know Gaming's coverage for the in-depth story. We'll probably cover the game here holistically at some point, but let's move on to what this means for the next DK game. While speculation runs wild, the only concrete information seems to be that Vicarious Visions' Donkey Kong project was canned in the very early stages of development, and that prompted Nintendo to take Donkey Kong back into their internal teams. Some have run with this and assumed that EPD Tokyo, the special team behind the likes of Mario Odyssey, is shepherding the franchise now. While that part of the rumor may not be well-founded, it would make sense. All of the DKC references in New Donk City would seem like a sly way to tease an upcoming game. They even threw in this monstrosity.
Oh man, they got a Diddy Kong costume. Neat!
This team at Nintendo cut their teeth on Donkey Kong Jungle Beat as their debut title, and they could be the perfect fit for bringing the character back into the limelight.
Assuming that's true, I wonder if they would want to radically change Donkey Kong in the process. There's been a huge gap since Tropical Freeze, and the character has stayed more or less the same since the Rare era starting in the mid-90s.
Take a closer look at Jungle Beat for a second. Let's see. We got no Kremlings, no Cranky Kong, no Diddy Kong, no Chunky Kong.
He's dead.
Different animal buddies, and the removal of most rare elements. Such a clean and drastic break from the Rare branding was harmless at the time, but I think it was a good look into where the team's head was at. They didn't want to mimic a game made by another studio. They wanted to break ground on something new.
Of course, we all know where the story went from here.
They went on to start making all the 3D Mario games, which were on a famously shorter leash. While fresh game mechanics were added to each title, so much of what Mario is in 3D has already been defined by a game that came out almost 30 years ago. While they may knock it out of the park with release after release, optimizing 3D Mario isn't a new prospect anymore.
A young and creative team would be looking for something truly new to sink their teeth into. Something they can make entirely from scratch rather than build on top of the well-established conventions of Mario. They can't make any new game, however. This is one of Nintendo's heavy-hitter studios. They would need something that also has immense opportunity for high sales.
And that's where Donkey Kong comes in. This franchise is a mess, but that wasn't always the case.
Many game franchises come and go without many entries, but there is an incredible amount of untapped potential with the Kongs.
If you're newer to the gaming hobby, you might look at DK as a mid-tier franchise or a Mario character. There's certainly truth to that if you're looking over the last decade.
Nintendo has criminally underutilized the Simian Supreme this generation. But did you know that Donkey Kong used to be bigger than Zelda?
Donkey Kong on the arcade was Nintendo's canon event, creating an opportunity to take the throne of the gaming industry.
The character was largely absent from the NES reign over the market, but he then returned at a crucial point in the console wars with Sega.
Even after this decade-long hiatus, The rare revival of DK put him up as the second best-selling franchise on the Super Nintendo, only bested by 2D Mario. Not only did Donkey Kong Country outsell Zelda on the Super Nintendo, its sequel did too. Even with the expected dip in sales from sequels on the same system, Diddy's Kong Quest outsold Zelda, Yoshi, and Star Fox.
Oh, but it doesn't end there.
DKC3 released after the N64 launched, and still outsold the likes of Metroid, Kirby, F-Zero, and Mario RPG. On the Game Boy, DK was right up there with the Zelda games, and on the N64, the franchise took the number 7 and 8 slots on the top 10 bestsellers list. Donkey Kong was one of Nintendo's top shelf franchises, but after the Rare buyout, he would spend another decade having an identity crisis.
And don't get me wrong, I love some King of Swing, but the Great Ape was surely knocked down from his pedestal.
Retro successfully captured the spirit of Donkey Kong Country while adding their own flair to the series 5 years after Jungle Beat. The branding and character design was a little bland, but you can tell where they were spending their resources in this game. DKC is all about immersive action, and I think they nailed it. Tropical Freeze refined everything about the original Returns entry, and it finally seemed like Donkey Kong was here. Like I said before, after Tropical Freeze, Retro wanted to create their own original IP. This mystery game would take up a lot of their time and ultimately get the banhammer. They were assigned to remastering Metroid Prime Trilogy for the Switch to coincide with the development of Bandai Namco's Metroid Prime 4. As fate would have it, the Japanese studio was struggling with the project, naturally making Retro a good fit to take it over. So they pushed the first Prime game out as an individual release and moved beyond. Between Retro's new assignment and the cancelled Vicarious Visions game, Donkey Kong became homeless.
Tropical Freeze and Tipping Stars would be the last new games we would get for a decade.
For Donkey Kong's over 40-year history, he has now had 2 10-year gaps in new games, and 1 10-year gap of experimental games.
Over each gap, his design and world would change pretty drastically in various attempts to shepherd the series.
Between the movie, theme park investment, and lack of long-term reliability of external partners, I think Nintendo is going to start exerting more control over the brand.
That brings us to our current moment. The EPD Tokyo team, or a new division of EPD born partially from them, is the perfect steward to bring Donkey Kong back to the third dimension, and I think chances are high that they are finishing development on that sort of title.
For my money, I think they're going to get wild with our conceptions of what a Donkey Kong game can be. While Nintendo has learned loud and clear that King K. Rool is an important part of the series, I wonder if their crockless plans were laid out before they came to fully wrap their minds around that. They might even alter their looks for this game.
Although the reception to the new design has not been received well, Nintendo is not necessarily known for their concern of what fans think.
If they did, they might have cancelled or slowly phased out Toon Link. There was a lot of whiplash going from the GameCube tech demo to Wind Waker, but Nintendo stayed the course. That version of Link was used for a generation, and even hung around until 2015's Triforce Heroes. He's dropped his iconic green tunic for the Breath of the Wild garb. Now before you panic, you can see a lot of different games where they play with the art style and feel of established characters. This doesn't necessarily mean that the character is changing though. Like compare Mario Wonder's box art with how he looks in the actual game. Mario didn't change, but he's being presented differently.
EPD 8, or whatever new team, is going to put out something that challenges the norms of Donkey Kong in the third dimension.
This is either going to be a one-off game akin to Jungle Beat, or the new direction of the series depending on overall reception. Jungle Beat didn't really take hold on the GameCube for a variety of reasons, but in an alternate timeline where it topped sales charts, we might have seen a future where Helper Monkey and Sumo Kong stood in for our Rare era favorites. Another possibility for the future is Nintendo beefing up their internal American studio. Nintendo Software Technology has mostly been known as the place where Mario vs. Donkey Kong is made, but they also played a pretty big role in Bowser's Fury. They co-developed it with the very team that was teasing Donkey Kong in New Donk City. Fascinating. They have staffed up in recent years with a lot of roles that have scope beyond porting things.
They're definitely gearing up for more original releases. But could they be making another Donkey Kong game?
Their expertise on 3D World and the arcade-adjacent series could be a sign of things to come.
At the same time, I think Donkey Kong Country is going to stay the course. In fact, I think that's going to be Retro's next game after Prime 4. It's not exactly a new idea that franchises at Nintendo can occupy 2 lanes at the same time.
Mario has been wahooing in both 2 and 3 dimensions in every generation. Zelda has always had a steady stream of top-down classic games to accompany the more ambitious 3D ones. Though there have been some gaps, Metroid has the same setup. If this reinvestment in Donkey Kong is real, they'll want to bolster their game offerings for the character.
And that brings us back to Retro. I think after Prime 4 is wrapped up, they'll be returning to Donkey Kong Country. After the grueling production of their cancelled musical RPG game, I don't imagine Nintendo is going to be too excited about new ideas from the studio. And don't hear me wrong.
I hate that the project they wanted to do didn't see the light of day, but I would bet Retro is going to play it safer this generation, bouncing between what they do best, Metroid and DK.
What's incredible to see looking through the last 10 years of the franchise's history is that Nintendo never intended for there to be a gap in Donkey Kong games to begin with. They kept with tradition, having Western studios make mainline entries for every console after the GameCube. But with Retro starting something new, and Activision pulling out a few years later, the reset button was hit on the next Donkey Kong game.
There's a version of this timeline where a new DK game hits in 2019 or 20, but the dev cycle on a new game was reset, and in these high-definition days, development takes 3 years at the very least, but more often 5 or 6. The clock truly starts once the team is assembled, and Nintendo doesn't have just one giant floor where they assign people to games. Specific teams are carefully curated to guide franchises or external partners. Finding or creating the right company to work on Donkey Kong was always going to take a lot of time, and in typical video game developer fashion, Nintendo has been very hush-hush about the whole affair.
While I can't definitively tell you what is coming and when, I think we'll get 2 to 3 original Donkey Kong projects on the Switch too. The future of the franchise is bright.